The early morning sun cut through the frost on the sidewalk as I rolled up in my wheelchair, coffee in hand, glancing nervously at the HOA president's house across the street. Mrs. Whitmore, clipboard in hand, was already out front, glaring like she had a vendetta against the entire neighborhood. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," I called, forcing cheer into my voice. She didn't respond. Just scribbled something, looked up, and gave me that patented scowl she saved for anyone who dared to own property in her jurisdiction. That I sighed, knowing the fight was inevitable. Another letter, another fine, another lecture about my wheelchair ramp violating the aesthetic of the community. A neighbor whispered from across the street, eyes wide. "Did you see? She's already taking photos of your ramp." Again, I forced a smile. "Great." At the mailbox, I found it stuffed with a letter thicker than a small novel. HOA notice. Violation. Fine. Threats. The usual dot. I ripped it open. The fine had doubled overnight. For unauthorized modifications to the front exterior. I felt my stomach drop, but force calm. If I lost my cool, Mrs. Whitmore would escalate even faster. Why phone buzzed. "Mom, don't worry. I'll be over. You're not alone." 20 minutes later, she arrived, brisk, no nonsense, clipboard in hand. "All right," she said. "Let's see how we can teach this lady a lesson in legality she won't forget." We walked to the front porch where Mrs. Whitmore had stationed herself. She straightened, squinting at us like hawks due to field mice. "Good morning, ladies," she said, voice sharp. "I hope you'll comply with the community standards today. Otherwise," I interrupted, pointing to the ramp. "This ramp is fully compliant with ADA regulations, Mrs. Whitmore. Want me to show you the federal guidelines?" Her face twisted, the first flicker of panic. "Uh-oh." Mom leaned in, voice firm, unwavering. "Actually, yes. I insist. Violations against someone with a disability carry serious legal repercussions. As the state ADA director, I have to ensure compliance." "You can't," she stammered. "Oh, we can," Mom said, tapping her clipboard for emphasis. "And we will." Neighbors peeked through blinds, some smirking, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Mrs. Whitmore was not used to public confrontation, especially one with legal teeth. By mid-morning, word had spread. The HOA board convened virtually, furious whispers echoing through group chats. "State ADA director involved? Over a wheelchair ramp?" One member typed. "She'll burn the HOA down." I wheeled inside for a break, coffee in hand, trying to steady my nerves. That's when I noticed the security cameras Mom had installed during her visit. "They're watching," she said, pointing to the screen. "Every step, every glare, every photo she takes. We have it all." The HOA's lawyer called. "Mrs. Whitmore, we may have a problem," he said, voice tight. "State director. Ramp. Phoenix. She's suing." I laughed quietly. Finally, momentum shifted. And momentum, as anyone in suburbia knows, is dangerous when wielded by someone with power. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of calls, emails, and veiled threats from neighbors who didn't understand how far this could go. Mom handled it like a pro, meticulous and ruthless. By noon, Mrs. Whitmore was pacing her porch, muttering to herself, completely aware that she had underestimated us. The sudden sound of sirens down the street made my heart skip a beat. Were they calling the cops on me? No. It was Mom's way of signaling the board. The legal cavalry had arrived. By late afternoon, the HOA meeting descended into chaos. Zoom screens froze as members yelled over one another. Threats of lawsuits, fines, and public humiliation filled the digital room. And somewhere, I couldn't help but grin. They had no idea what was coming next. Mrs. Whitmore stormed out of her house, flinging her clipboard to the ground. "This isn't over," she yelled. And I knew, as Mom and I watched from the porch, that the HOA had just triggered a chain of events that would change our neighborhood forever. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word had traveled faster than wildfire, whispers and sidelong glances following us as we wheeled down the sidewalk. The ramp stood firm, gleaming in the winter sun, a small symbol of defiance. Mrs. Whitmore had barricaded herself behind her curtains, but the occasional peek confirmed she was awake, fuming. She had posted signs on her lawn, "Violation in progress," in sharp black letters. Some neighbors rolled their eyes. Others whispered about the chaos she'd already caused. Mom pulled me aside. "They don't understand who they're dealing with," she said, adjusting her clipboard like a general preparing her battle plan. "It's not just the law, it's leverage, and they've stepped on all of it." I laughed softly, still shaking. "Feels like a war zone." "It is," she said, "and we're going to win." By mid-morning, the HOA sent another email. The subject line read, "Immediate compliance required. Failure will result in escalated penalties." I clicked it open, eyes scanning the aggressive, self-important words. And then I noticed it, a subtle threat disguised as guidance. They had hired an independent inspector to photograph the ramp, take measurements, and report back. I turned to Mom. "They're serious this time." "They always are," she said calmly. "But they have no idea who we are." By noon, the inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, and approached cautiously. Mrs. Whitmore trailed behind like a shadow, muttering complaints under her breath. The inspector measured the ramp, scribbling notes, and I noticed his hesitant glance at Mom. She smiled faintly, unamused. "Everything is fully compliant," she said, voice steady. "You're welcome to report that." Mrs. Whitmore's scowl deepened. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The inspector looked back at his notes, then up at her, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. Later, my phone rang. It was the HOA president, her voice tight and wavering. You can't do this. The community standards, I'm sorry," I said, matching her tone with calm authority. "The law doesn't negotiate with personal vendettas." She huffed. "You think you're untouchable?" I smiled. "We're not untouchable. We're compliant." Mom leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "And we're prepared." By evening, the neighborhood had turned into a silent battlefield. Cars slowed as they passed our house, neighbors exchanging glances as if waiting for the next explosion. Mrs. Whitmore's mailbox overflowed with complaints from the board and furious emails from residents loyal to her cause. But she didn't leave the house. She didn't dare. That night, while the frost glimmered under the streetlights, a package arrived. Inside were forms, official complaints, legal notices, documents ready to challenge every violation the HOA had claimed. Mom reviewed them meticulously, checking boxes, highlighting key points, and drafting letters that would make any lawyer shiver. The next morning, a crowd had gathered, drawn by curiosity and the rumor mill. Mrs. Whitmore appeared at her window, glaring at us, her mouth moving but no sound escaping. The camera Mom had installed outside captured every expression, every futile attempt at intimidation that I wheeled outside with a grin. "Morning," I said casually. "Did you sleep well?" Her glare could have frozen time. "This isn't over," she hissed. Mom stepped forward, clipboard raised. "Actually, it is. You've been given every chance. You've ignored the law, disregarded ADA regulations, and tried to fine a citizen illegally. The consequences now are entirely on you." The whispers from the crowd grew louder. Someone muttered, "State ADA director, really?" A neighbor stepped forward, handing over a folder. It contained emails, letters, and even photos from past violations Mrs. Whitmore had tried to enforce unfairly. "We thought you might need this," they said. Mrs. Whitmore's face drained of color. Her hands trembled. She looked around at the gathering crowd. Realizing her power was evaporating, I rolled closer to Mom. "Is it over?" She shook her head, smirking. "Not yet, but we're about to teach her a lesson she won't forget." By afternoon, the HOA board had convened an emergency meeting. Zoom screens flickered as angry voices argued over how to proceed. "State director involved. Ramp compliant. Lawsuits incoming," one board member yelled. Another slammed a hand on the table. "She can't do this to us. It's harassment." Mom's emails were already in their inboxes. Each letter carefully outlined every violation, every misstep the HOA had made in the past, and every potential legal consequence of continuing this feud. By the time the board finished their meeting, the weight of what they had started was clear. That evening, I wheeled past Mrs. Whitmore's house. The signs she had posted days before were torn down, her driveway empty. She hadn't left, but she no longer appeared at her window. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Victory, subtle but palpable, lingered in the air. Late that night, Mom and I sat on the porch, the glow from the streetlights casting long shadows. "They'll regroup," I said. "They can try," Mom replied. "But they have no idea how far we can go. Not just us, our network, our knowledge. They thought they could bully a ramp. They woke a storm instead." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "A storm. I like that." Mom leaned back, smiling faintly. "Watch closely. The next few days are going to be interesting." And just like that, the neighborhood had shifted. Every glance, every whisper carried tension. Every HOA threat now met with calculated resistance. And somewhere deep inside, I realized Mrs. Whitmore's arrogance had sealed her fate. The following morning, the true consequences of underestimating us began to unfold. Letters from legal authorities started appearing at her door. Emails from residents demanding accountability flooded the HOA inbox. Even local news picked up on the escalating conflict, curious about the woman challenging an entire board. Mrs. Whitmore spent the day pacing. She made frantic calls, demanding action, her voice rising with panic and disbelief. The power she once wielded so freely had crumbled into helplessness. And in that moment, I knew the final act was approaching. The morning sun hit the street like a spotlight, casting every detail of the neighborhood into sharp focus. Mrs. Whitmore's house sat silent, a fortress of fury and fear. No clipboard, no signs, no threats, just her and the growing realization that she had lost. I wheeled up the driveway, Mom beside me, both of us calm, collected. The door creaked open. Her face, pale and drawn, stared at us like a child caught in the act. This isn't fair," she stammered, voice shaking. Mom smiled gently. "Fairness is following the law, Mrs. Whitmore. You ignored it. You ignored us. And now," she gestured at the pile of letters, legal notices, and community complaints stacked on the porch. "You face the consequences of your own actions." Mrs. Whitmore's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The weight of every unjust fine, every petty inspection, every aggressive threat finally landed. She had spent months building power over the neighborhood, and in one miscalculated attempt, she had awakened a force she could not control. Neighbors began to emerge, quiet smiles on their faces. Some clapped. Others whispered congratulations. Word had spread. The HOA lady had finally met her match. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, I replied, rolling past her with a calm smile. Actions speak louder than words. Mom followed, placing a hand on my shoulder. Let this be a lesson, she said softly. Power is only real if it's used wisely. Threats and fear don't last. Justice does. Mrs. Whitmore sank back in her chair as we left the driveway, the sound of our wheels fading down the street. Behind us, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The ramp still stood, legal, unmovable, a symbol not just of accessibility, but of accountability. The storm had passed. And in its wake, one thing was certain. Karma had arrived on time, dressed in the calm authority of the law, and the HOA had finally learned who truly ran this neighborhood.